Hi, I'm Francesca Hall and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we visit the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth and our interviewer, Linda Mowl, speaks with curator Philippe Vergne about the exhibition Doug Aitken, Electric Earth. Now for Art This Week.
I'm Linda Mowl, and today I'm at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. I'm speaking with Philippe Vergne, who's the director at the Museum of Contemporary Art Los Angeles, and also the organizer of the exhibition Doug Aitken, Electric Earth. Philippe, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
My pleasure.
I want to start at the beginning. Can you tell me when and how the idea for this exhibition sort of took hold?
I started to work at MoCA in Los Angeles in March of 2014, and I think it's shortly after that I was looking at the museum. I was looking at the artists around and thinking it would be great as the one of the first big projects we do for the museum to bring someone who, on one hand, was quite a known artist in Los Angeles, but an artist who actually, when I talking with Doug, I realized that he never had a big presentation or a big show in Los Angeles. Not that everybody should, but that his work was only known for a certain aspect of the work. So we started talking, and I think what helped is that we've known each other for quite a long time, almost 20 years. So I was, privileged to follow the work, and so. But it really started out of a conversation on, I think, the rooftop of his house in LA, talking not about his work actually, but about exhibition, about the role of exhibition, or to think of an exhibition. And it really started as a very kind of open conversation about how can we change the experience of a work of art in a museum at time beyond the museum. And then I was thinking, well, maybe it's time to bring all these works together.
So you said you'd never had a major show in LA, but also this is the first, what you might call a survey of his work, or at least a mid-career survey, which is sort of surprising, I think, because he's such a well-known artist, that no one has really undertaken this kind of project. Although it maybe is less surprising once you walk in the galleries and you see how much work it has been probably to put it all together, just based on his medium. Can you tell me a little bit about the commitment you were making when you first started and how your ideas of that commitment might have changed as the exhibition took shape?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the first part of your question is that I think for a long time, Doug has not refused to do a survey, but when approached by an institution, he would rather work with the institution to produce a new ambitious project. So, and it's very part of his personality and the way he works to be more attracted by what is yet to come than by what had already happened. So, and you're right, it took a significant amount of work, of great work, and because I really look at the exhibition as a collaboration with the artist. And it actually pushed us in the museum at a different level. First we realized, and it was a very, what I'm about to say is very much related to our museum, not to every museum, is that the artist was dealing with a level of, a way of working, a level of technology that was kind of beyond what we expect or what we are used to in museum. And meaning, film production capacity, editing capacity, architecture capacity. So that became a very important part of our work together, because Doug, for 2 years we kept working on the floor plans, we kept working on the architecture of the museum, inside the museum. We knew which work basically we wanted rather quickly, and then how could we actually carve an experience in the museum, carve both a time, sound and light landscape in the museum from the work, and also give the work, let the museum react to the work rather than adapt the work to the museum. And it's also because at the Geffen Contemporary, where we did the show, it's a very large industrial building, so we didn't have the constraint of basically existing walls. So it was really looking at the work and growing the exhibition from the inside, from the work, and also thinking of what could be done outside of the museum. And one project became very important as an extension of the exhibition that was called the Underwater Pavilions.
Right.
That happened
Off of Catalina. Right?
out of Catalina Island. Yeah.
Very cool. So as you're saying, the exhibition, the pieces have to have their own amount of space, and the building has to work for these pieces. But in a lot of cases, Aitken works in a site-specific way. In one piece in particular, Song 1, which is in this exhibition, was originally for the Hirshhorn Museum. So what techniques were you using really to make the museum environment work for these pieces together?
Well, I don't know if we had a technique.
Trial and error?
Well, there is. It's very. On one hand, there is I had a sense of what I wanted to achieve through the exhibition. So I had a sense of a progression and a crescendo through the exhibition, and so I really wanted people to understand that even if the show was not chronological, that there is an expansion of the work, but also of the idea of what a work of art can be throughout an experience of the exhibition. So on one hand, you had early photographs, the first immersive video installation, and the second one, and then as we made the selection of work, for me, I wanted to show that from someone who was very interested in the notion of communication, landscape, and narrative, when these three concepts started to expand and crystallize into the work was expanding. So then it was, if you follow the trajectory of the career, you have single channel video, then you have immersive installation, then you have immersive installation that have the scale of architecture. Right. Then you have architecture, right. And then you have architecture underwater. So that for me was very important to be able to show that he was an artist that was thinking way beyond what we knew. Then you have also the theater, of an exhibition and the way you manage people's experience. And there is another aspect for me that which I think is very important in Aitken's work, is the fact that he invents spaces to be shared, places. And you were talking about Song 1, and for me it was very important that Song 1 was physically at the center of the exhibition, that there's no way whatever circulation someone elected to follow in the show, that you always have to go through it. When you have a village and you have a plaza, in the middle of the plaza you have a tree, and people come and sit around the tree. That's, the plaza of a village is one of the first kind of, civic social place. So I wanted Song 1, which was thought through as a civic work, because it was at the Hirshhorn on the Mowl in Washington, and the Mowl is also the place where on a regular basis democracy is celebrated or we think it's democracy. And so by nature, this piece had this kind of, for me, very civic quality. It was in a public space. It was circular. People can enter it. The loop of the sound is circular. It's a shared place because you sit in the middle. It's a shared place because you know the song, even if you don't know it.
Right.
But it's kind of part of, it's a song that has been around since the 30s, has been interpreted by many musicians. Within the film, there are people that one can recognize or identify. There's a famous musician, a famous actress, other people. So all that contributed to make this work a common place, a shared place. It's like a little bit when you throw a rock in the water and you have the concentric circle, and then from there the exhibition started to expand to the place where you actually add concentric circle, because there's a piece which is not here called the Sonic Fountain, that was based on this notion of circularity. In terms of the exhibition, I was very attached to this idea of circularity. Several pieces, and are circular. The notion of circularity, whether it's the music loop, the image loop, the idea of creating this space where people enter, is very much at the center of Doug's work. A little bit like an ancient agora or a theater in a round.
So I also wanted to ask you about, when you're thinking about this exhibition as a survey of Doug's work, how have you accounted for certain things that are a little bit more ephemeral, like his happenings and things like that?
So we made a selection of documentation on happenings, and we had 2 locations in the exhibition where they were on view. We had 2 screening rooms. We had we have a small auditorium, and so with Doug we put together a program that was running every day, that was either single channel pieces that were important for his development and documentation on performance, and action. So and there is, it's also an important distinction in Doug's work, is you have the work, you have documentation on the work. For instance, if you take the piece he did in Brazil, which is Sonic Pavilion, so it was difficult to bring to Los Angeles. So Doug made a film, which is a document, not the work of art. And there's many instances like that where we try to show the way from one idea, for the initial idea, Doug go through one way to formalize it, and then when it's formalized, one way to document it. It's the same with the underwater pavilion. Doug produced a film around them, and so they existed for a while, and they might continue to exist. But then there is a trace of that work.
And the exhibition is really carrying that through in a couple of ways. We're sitting here in the auditorium where they'll be showing daily screenings of a lot of his linear films, or like his one-channel work is a way to think about it, including the Black Mirror, which is, I guess, not strictly speaking, one of those one-channel works.
It's both actually. I think you have few works like that where you have the single channel work and then you have the installation work. I think if you take Diamond Sea, you have also like single channel, one single projection, and the installation. So it's also an interesting way for the artist to really explore the possibility of what is medium makes possible. And for me, it's a little bit like when you look at, if you project yourself back 200 years ago, when the painter would do, lithographs, and So the work would exist under different format.
Diamond Sea, 1997, is a really important work for Doug Aitken. Can you tell me a little bit about how that marked a point in his career?
Well, I believe that was the first time. I mean, you have many aspects of his work that came together at that moment. Actually, the year 97 seems to be a very important year for Doug. But in Diamond Sea, I would say that first you have this, if I take the few ideas that for me underline the entire work, landscape, narrative, and communication. All these moments, all these notions are coming together. So first you have the notion of landscape, and always, you know, it's not any landscape that he's looking at. It's always an anthropic landscape, and you know there is not a direct affiliation, but I think someone like Bob Smithson is very important for Doug. So this notion of entropy, this space that are either in the making or are instant ruins, or you don't know if they are, you know, like even if it's a ruin, it's always bringing another state of the place or the matter. And when he went to this location in Africa, in Namibia, and he was fascinated by the idea that this gigantic diamond mine was this endlessly eroded piece of land that almost didn't exist on any map and was abandoned by any kind of life. So first I have this interest in this transitional landscape. Then you have the idea of a narrative. So a narrative that you can inhabit, that you can actually edit yourself as you move through the installation. And this idea of being surrounded by images and be at the center of the narrative. You almost become a protagonist of a film which is around you. There is also this idea of the breaking down of narrative. There is no beginning, no end. It's in a loop. It doesn't tell a story. It goes again the grain of thinking, you know, a good movie is a good story. And then you have this idea of communication, and you look at all the elements that he's using. So you have a monitor, you have film projection, video projection, you have a light box, and all these different quote-unquote format belongs to the world of communication. You know, the light box is, you know, you see it everywhere. You know, it's an advertising trick, or support or medium. So for me, all that came together in this work, you know, and it was done in a way that I think for many of our generation was a rediscovery of the possibility of this medium. But you know, the early experimentation were done. Then you had a moment where you have, you know, the moment where video become, the use of the medium of video become almost an academism. And then you have the moment of the medium is almost exclusively driven by the medium. And great work. You have this, you know, if I think of someone like Gary Hill, where, you know, it's between the documentation of a performance and a real film, and the way the moving image can document the formation of language, if I take someone like Gary Hill. And with Doug, there is a generation of artists who look at that differently and say, well, we know we know the history of experimentation. We know how far the medium has been pushed. And it's been pushed in a very specific direction with the notion of almost like the idea of high and low became irrelevant again, that whether it's Doug Aitken or Matthew Barney or someone like Pierre Huyghe or Philippe Vergne or Dominique Gonzalez Foster, they started to use it differently. And for Doug, who's someone who grew up in California, in Los Angeles, with few things that were very important to him: the tradition of experimentation, mostly musical experimentation, and the importance of someone like Terry Riley for him, and then movies and I wouldn't say entertainment, because it's not what he does, but the understanding of the aesthetic strategies that entertainment use to bring you in.
Another work I really would like to talk about is the exhibition's title, Electric Earth. There's a piece also called Electric Earth, which, as you mentioned earlier, is organized sort of to a crescendo. And if so, I think the way you at least logically follow through the exhibition in this space, you sort of end there to a degree. Can you tell me a bit about the piece Electric Earth and its significance?
That the piece that actually changed, like at this moment, everything we just talked about, but this idea of using this moving image technology differently than his ancestors,
Right.
really become clear. You know, you enter a city, you enter.
It's 8 channels instead of 3 or 4 or however many he had been using before.
And it's also, so on one hand, he's pushing it very far. On the other hand, he's also maybe one of the most quote unquote conventional piece, because that's one of the rare pieces where you have a beginning and an end.
Right.
Where you see this young man in his hotel room who seems to be bored out of his mind and lonely.
Yeah.
And then he's the last man on earth. And he starts to walk through an empty city. And every screen is like a cubist painting, you know, is a different angle, not formally, but timely. And then you start to follow him, and he's surrounded. The only thing that surrounds him are signs. So empty space and signs, street signs, vending machine, empty laundromat. And then as he walked through the city, his body starts to have this very, what do you call that? Truncated movement, very fast movement, as if his entire body was permanently bombarded by either electric shock or information, which actually might not have been at the time, but it is now. We are permanently bombarded by information right now. We don't, you know, if every time the phone in your pocket or in my pocket, every time we receive a message, we would get a little, you know, a little electric tease, who would be like the character in this movie. So somehow looking at this person, this last man on earth walking through the city, is looking at someone who's being bombarded by this massive amount of information, and it's so massive that actually it starts to cancel all the information, cancel each other out, so it's a piece that was done before we were all obsessed with that, that where the field of information was not as intense as it is right now, but kind of anticipated this moment.
I love that you mentioned the phrasing of bombarded by information, because a little bit, I think sometimes when I'm in a work by Doug Aitken, or you're in one of the rooms with the multi-channel projections, it's a bit of sensory overload, or perhaps it's the talent of Doug Aitken, or the magic of Doug Aitken is that you're right up at the brink of sensory overload. I think he seems to know just what you can absorb, and he stops right just shy of that. And I think there's something really interesting about that in his work, that he is able to decide the amount people can handle.
And I think the sensory overload is, you're right, it's strategic. You know, that's how you let go. You know, at some point the information or the sound or the visual saturation, you know, make you lower your guard, and then you're in.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for speaking
My
with
pleasure.
me today.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
We want to thank Philippe for speaking with us, and for more information on the exhibition, go to themodern.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your Polaroid.